A sea of 26,000 people on their feet, not a single word rehearsed, just one name shouted, cried, sung, echoing through the newly rebuilt walls of the 4 August Stadium. IBIB. They weren't just cheering for a man, they were welcoming home a promise that had once felt impossible. For nearly 4 years, this stadium, the most iconic in Burkina Faso, stood empty, wounded, waiting. Its gates rusted, its turf faded, its legacy nearly forgotten. This was once the place where the legendary Captain Thomas Sankara spoke to a generation. But years of neglect turned it into a symbol of what was lost. Until August 4th, 2025, at exactly 3:50 p.m., under a sky hot with memory and meaning, another captain arrived, Ibrahim Traoré. And when he stepped through that gate, history walked in with him. But here's the question: can the reopening of a stadium really mark the rebirth of a nation's dignity? Is it just about football, or is this about something far bigger, something every American who's ever watched a flag rise at the sound of an anthem might understand? Because what we witnessed wasn't just a sports ceremony. It was the reclaiming of sovereignty, the revival of youth pride, and the healing of a national soul one step at a time on Burkinabè soil. If you believe that leadership is proven not just through speeches, but through rebuilding what matters to people, please like this video. Share it with someone who still believes Africa is rising and rising proud. And subscribe if you think stories like this deserve to be told before they are forgotten. The gates of 4 August Stadium had not opened in years. Dust had settled, paint had peeled, grass had withered into memory. It had become a ghost of its former self, once the pride of Burkina Faso, now just another promise broken by time and silence. But on August 4th, 2025, all of that changed. At exactly 3:50 p.m., under the searing Sahel sun, a convoy slowed at the western gate. Cameras clicked, drums beat. Then came the moment no one had dared to imagine for years: the arrival of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, walking toward the archway with measured, determined steps. When he passed through the gate, a thunderclap of applause erupted. It wasn't polite clapping, it was raw, alive. It sounded like a dam breaking. Over 26,000 people rose from their seats, shouting his name, not as a politician, but as the man who brought their stadium back from the dead. And as he crossed that final step onto the turf, history whispered something powerful. You are not just reopening a stadium, you are reopening hope. For decades, the 4 August Stadium had stood as a monument to unity and revolution. Named after the date of Thomas Sankara's 1983 uprising, it once hosted national speeches, African Cup qualifiers, and gatherings that shaped the nation's identity. But years of poor maintenance and political neglect had closed its gates. The Confederation of African Football, CAF, and FIFA had both banned international matches there. Burkina Faso, despite its talent, had to borrow stadiums abroad. Every match played outside their soil felt like another piece of national dignity being outsourced. And the people noticed. As one sports commentator put it, we had a team, we had fans, we had fire in our hearts, but no home. The renovation was not easy. The project was delayed repeatedly due to funding issues, shifting governments, and conflict. For many years, every time the question was asked, when will the stadium reopen, it was met with shrugs, excuses, and silence. That changed the day President Traoré took office. According to Minister of Sports Roland Samda, the president did not treat this as a side project. He saw it as essential. He told us, we don't need luxury, we need dignity, we need home. The new government didn't just repaint walls, they rebuilt the entire infrastructure: FIFA-approved turf, modern seating for 30,000, high-capacity lighting for night games, athletics tracks, updated locker rooms, and security systems that rivaled those in Europe. By the summer of 2025, the stadium was not only ready, it was reborn. The opening ceremony was broadcast live across the country. The crowd arrived early, dressed in national colors. A parade of youth athletes marched proudly across the field. Cultural dancers, drummers, and musicians turned the stadium into a living painting of Burkina Faso's soul. Children waved flags, elders wiped tears. Then came the formal speeches. Maurice Kone, president of the special delegation of Ouagadougou, stood before the crowd and declared, "This is not just concrete and grass. This is where our future plays, where our youth dares, where our nation rises." He thanked the technicians, builders, planners, and above all, Captain Ibrahim Traoré for putting national pride before politics. This wasn't just about football. Officials reminded the public that the stadium would also host track and field competitions, cultural festivals, youth employment fairs, national celebrations. By anchoring these events in Burkinabè soil, the country was reclaiming something more important than a game. It was reclaiming the right to be seen, heard, and proud. As one announcer said during the live coverage, playing abroad is exile. Playing here is sovereignty. The 4 August Stadium, once a silent shell, was now a roaring heart again. Not only open to football, but open to dreams. Not only renovated, but resurrected. And standing in the middle of it all, arms crossed, face calm, was the man who made it happen. It wasn't planned. It wasn't choreographed. But when Captain Ibrahim Traoré emerged from the players' tunnel and stepped onto the field of the 4 August Stadium, something happened. A sound, a surge erupted from the stands. It wasn't music, though music was playing. It wasn't speech, though dignitaries had already spoken. It was a sound deeper than words. IB, IB, IB. The crowd roared his name again and again, louder and louder, until even the microphones could no longer isolate the chant. Across the nation, people watching from their homes cried. Elders who remembered Sankara's revolution whispered prayers. Young men and women, many of whom had never seen a football match on home soil, raised their fists in the air. It wasn't a political slogan. It was gratitude. It was relief. It was homecoming. Inside the stadium, more than 26,000 citizens stood shoulder to shoulder. There were no VIPs in that moment. No ministers, no journalists, just people, just one voice. Journalists described it as a national heartbeat made audible. One elderly man holding the hand of his grandson was overheard saying, "When Sankara walked here in '84, I was the child. Today, my grandson watches Traoré. This is our cycle. This is hope reborn." For many, the moment wasn't just about a stadium. It was about witnessing something rare in modern leadership, a promise kept. After the roar, the formal speeches resumed, but everything had changed. The air was electric. The audience wasn't just listening, they were believing. Maurice Koné, president of the Ouagadougou Special Delegation, delivered his welcome excellency. "Mr. President, your presence here proves that dreams postponed are not dreams denied. You have turned patience into power." He addressed the youth directly. "This stadium belongs to you. Let it carry your talents, your spirit, your future." Then came the Minister of Sports, Roland Somda, who had been overseeing the renovation for years. His voice cracked as he spoke. "So many nights I thought this day might never come. But today I say with pride, Burkina Faso can host, can lead, can inspire. We no longer borrow dignity. We build it." The crowd erupted again, not in political cheerleading, but in raw human emotion. The ripple effect was immediate. Radio hosts in rural towns played live commentary. Mothers called their sons serving in the military. Students in dormitories waved national flags from windows. Social media in Burkina Faso, usually quiet and cautious, exploded with messages. "Today we are a nation again." We waited. He delivered. From rust to glory. IB forever. Even opposition figures usually critical of the Traoré government acknowledged the symbolism of the day. One commented anonymously, "We can argue politics, but this stadium, this was necessary." And he did it. From international sports bodies, the recognition came quickly. CAF and FIFA both issued congratulatory messages praising Burkina Faso for completing a world-class facility under difficult conditions. But from Western governments, silence. Perhaps because this ceremony didn't fit the narrative they expected. No foreign flags, no donor speeches, no branded banners, just a people standing with their leader proud and sovereign. A quiet statement was made that day without ever being spoken. "We can do this, alone if we must." In a nation scarred by war, instability, and loss, the reopening of a stadium might seem small, but not this one, because this stadium was never just bricks and seats. It was a memory, a wound, a challenge, and now a triumph. As night fell over the 4 August Stadium, the lights blazed on for the first time in years. Children took selfies, veterans wept, and somewhere in the sky above Ouagadougou, a quiet sense of dignity returned to the air. Not imposed, not gifted, but built, together. When the gates of the 4 August Stadium reopened, they did more than welcome football back to Burkina Faso. They reopened confidence, identity, and a new national contract between leaders and the people. This was not just a ribbon cutting, it was a reset. One of the most immediate and powerful impacts of the stadium's reopening was on Burkina Faso's youth, a demographic that had for decades been told to wait for peace, wait for jobs, wait for their turn. But on August 4th, they were not asked to wait. They were invited in. "This is your stadium," declared President Ibrahim Traoré. "Play on it, run on it, dream on it, protect it." Thousands of young people, athletes, musicians, volunteers had participated in the renovation or in the opening ceremony itself. Some laid tiles, others painted walls. Many more organized logistics, music, and food. The result? A shift from passive spectators to active nation builders. This wasn't just a stadium for them to watch others succeed. It was a platform for them to perform, compete, and lead. For years, Burkina Faso had been playing its international matches in neighboring countries due to stadium disqualifications. This created a phenomenon many called the double exile: exiled economically by global debt, exiled athletically by stadium closures. Each match played abroad meant tens of thousands of dollars spent elsewhere, fans left behind, and a team stripped of its 12th man, the home crowd. Now that era is over. Home games are not just about logistics, one sports analyst said. They are about identity. When you play on your own land, you remember who you are. The psychological impact of playing in your own stadium is no small matter. It levels the playing field literally and emotionally. It tells the world we are no longer borrowing dignity. We are building it. President Traoré didn't need to boast. He didn't need a long speech listing achievements. The stadium itself spoke for him. In a region often rocked by coups, protests, and disillusionment, the ability to deliver a national-scale infrastructure project on time with transparency and visible quality is political capital of the highest order. No Western consultant, no IMF loan, no billion-dollar ribbon from a former colonial power, just leadership commitment and Burkinabè hands. And people noticed. Even skeptics found themselves silent. Opposition figures, usually eager to criticize, admitted off-camera that the reopening of 4 August Stadium had united the country in a way elections never could. "You don't argue with results," said one former political advisor. "He gave them their stadium back. That's not politics. That's nationhood." Beyond Burkina Faso, neighboring nations in the Sahel Alliance AES, including Mali and Niger, watched closely. These countries, too, have suffered from war, instability, and external interference. And they, too, seek ways to rebuild their nations, not just with arms, but with hope. The success of 4 August Stadium became a case study in national self-reliance, post-conflict reconstruction, investing in culture and sport as tools of unity. There is now growing talk of a Sahel-wide sports league with Ouagadougou as a central host city. And more importantly, there is a new pride. If Burkina Faso can do it, so can we. Perhaps the most significant political message was this: infrastructure is sovereignty. When a nation cannot host its own events, protect its athletes, or welcome its people into safe spaces, it has lost more than functionality. It has lost confidence. By reopening the 4 August Stadium, Burkina Faso reclaimed a piece of its territorial soul. It reminded the people and the world that nationhood is not declared on paper. It is built in cement, painted in national colors, and open to the sound of 26,000 voices in unison. As the last echoes of that opening day faded, something new remained. Not just a stadium, not just a field, but a living symbol of what happens when leadership chooses people over power and delivers what it promises. International reactions to the reopening of 4 August Stadium were in a word measured. From CAF and FIFA, there was praise. Official letters congratulated the Traoré administration on delivering a stadium that now met all international standards. A beacon of African sports revival, one CAF executive called it. A powerful step forward, noted a FIFA spokesperson. Almost nothing. No statement from Washington, no congratulations from Brussels, no headline in the New York Times. And maybe that silence said more than any speech could. Because this stadium wasn't built with World Bank loans. It didn't come with Western consultants or foreign contractors. There was no corporate logo behind the president at the opening ceremony. Instead, it was built by local engineers, youth workers, and Burkinabè hands, supervised by a military-led government that the West remains wary of. In a world where infrastructure in Africa is often presented as charity, the 4 August Stadium challenged that narrative head-on. No aid, no apology, just results. For many Africans, and particularly for the younger generation, this was deeply meaningful. Because they've seen enough ribbon cuttings with foreign flags, enough sports centers funded by donors who never come back, enough stadiums with European names on African soil. This was different. And for many in the global south, it sent a message: we are not incapable. We were just never allowed to lead. For the American public, especially older generations who lived through the Cold War, the Civil Rights era, and the rise of global interventionism, this story offers a chance to reflect. What does it mean when a small African nation under sanctions and suspicion restores a stadium without foreign help? What does it mean when the people chant a leader's name, not out of fear, but because he delivered? And maybe the deeper question is this: are we as Americans willing to support leaders abroad who build rather than those who simply align with our politics? The silence from Washington wasn't just diplomatic caution, it may have been discomfort. Because the story of 4 August Stadium isn't just about bricks and turf, it's about a continent rising without permission. In a global era defined by image, the picture of Captain Ibrahim Traoré standing alone on the stadium turf, surrounded by thousands who call him IB, wasn't just powerful, it was unmanageable for traditional media, because it didn't fit the usual frame, and because it might inspire others. What began as a sports story ended as something much deeper. The reopening of 4 August Stadium was not just about football, it was about returning dignity to a people who had been asked to wait for too long. It was about proving that even in a nation battered by instability, war, and international skepticism, dreams could still be built with local hands. And yet, while the people of Burkina Faso stood tall in the sun, proud and unified, much of the world looked away. Why? Perhaps because this moment didn't require foreign aid. Perhaps because it didn't come with a press conference in Paris. Perhaps because it was a reminder that Africa can rebuild itself without permission. If you believe that leadership is about delivery, not slogans, if you believe that sovereignty is more than a flag, then moments like these should inspire you. But they should also wake you up. Because the silence that followed this celebration, it wasn't harmless. It was strategic. Because the idea of African nations regaining pride through local action without loans, without NGOs, without overseers, terrifies those who built systems on dependence. What happens when more countries follow Traoré's model? What happens when the youth believe they don't have to leave to succeed? What happens when sovereignty begins in places as simple as a stadium? The answer is both hopeful and dangerous to the status quo. As Americans, especially those of us who have seen generations rise and fall, wars declared, promises made, we know the difference between words and work. So ask yourself, do you think President Ibrahim Traoré's model of building before voting, of delivering before debating, is the path more nations should consider? Or is it too risky in a world still dominated by global expectations? Leave a comment. Speak from your heart. Share this story with someone who still believes in national dignity wherever it lives. And subscribe if you believe that truth, no matter where it comes from, deserves a louder voice than headlines. Because what happened at 4 August Stadium wasn't just a renovation. It was a revolution, quiet, strong, and homegrown.